Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here. Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration.
Welcome to the Love Pod, everyone. My name is Nathaniel. I'm your host today. We are so privileged to have a special guest, Tracy Brinkmann, here, who is just an inspiring entrepreneur. And I know, Tracy, you have really a wonderful story to share with us all. You're the founder of Dark Horse Entrepreneurship, I believe. And I was reading your bio, and so many entrepreneurs go through so many challenges to really bring our unique presence and offerings into this world. And I believe entrepreneurship is really what, pushes our species forward, whether it's innovators, inventors, people who are just really expanding our consciousness of what's possible. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. I think there's a lot of things we're going to chat about, like AI and conscious parenting and all kinds of things. So I'd love to just welcome you and ask you to tell us who you are and what brings you here today.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for Nathan for having me aboard. You know, when someone says introduce yourself, that's always like the hardest thing to do. Have someone else introduce you is always easy. You're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I'm awesome. I am I say humble, I'm proud of it. Father of four, former military man. Like you said, I'm the voice behind the Dark Horse Entrepreneur AI Escape Plan podcast and another one, the Your Success DNA podcast that focuses on personal development. And like you said, I think my story is a bit of I'll call it a redemption arc. It's like a movie sometimes, addiction, loss of an 18-month-old daughter, wicked divorce, bankruptcy, all that while I was, leading a corporate life and then marketing teams and building things for myself and starting coaching folks and doing entrepreneurship. And, nowadays I focus on helping parents and small business owners compress time and use AI to, build start side hustles, sometimes even a main hustle. So that's a long-winded answer of who I am, but I think at the end of the day, I'm a proud father, a proud husband, and a guy that just loves his farm and his dogs.
You said so much in that really condensed. I mean, that's a whole journey of a lifetime you just shared with us, Tracy. And
hmm
I mean, there's so much that I'd love to explore and unpack with you. I mean, one of the things stood out to me. I mean, in my reticular activation system, I have a young girl who is 21 months years old, 20 months young little girl, and to me it would be just such a like a devastating thing. And I know a lot of parents who lose little ones like that, such a setback, like in managing all kinds of things like this. And you mentioned divorce and bankruptcy, all these things. How has this helped shape your character, and how has it brought you to the man you are here now, serving people and really with this mission of helping families to have more of that quality time?
It's funny is so many times in conversations, people will ask almost a side question to what you just asked is, if you could go back and change one thing about your past, what would you change? And I've pondered that one a lot. I even discussed it with my wife not too long ago. And I don't think it would change anything because it is those things that I went through that brought me to who I am today. And look, I've done things I'm not proud of. I've experienced things that I would not wish upon my worst enemy. But it is those series of events that made me who I am. You mentioned obviously the loss of a daughter at any age would be devastating to
Yeah.
a parent, and having experienced it, I know it. And if it hadn't been for what happened previous to that, I don't think I would have reacted the same way. And what I mean by that is coming out of the military. I joined the military right out of high school and served 6 years and got out and started my little business in Southern California. And this was about the time when cocaine and methamphetamines were huge in that area.
Mm.
And I stepped into that arena, unfortunately. And I don't say this with pride. And at the same time, unfortunately, I started using my entrepreneurial skills to be able to afford the product. How about that? I'm going to say it as nicely as possible. And this resulted in about a almost 3 year time period where, I was on the other side of the tracks. I was the bad guy in the movie, right? And it got to the point where the police literally kicked open the door to my condominium, which became a deciding point of my life. Now, luckily, I was not there when they came in, but they did come back later on and bring me in for some questions, and they asked all the right questions. And so, as I'm walking back from the police station, I have my father's voice in my head. My father is a 23-year military man and very family first. And in my mind, I could hear family first in his voice, no joke. And I had a 3-month-old daughter at that point. And it was started ringing in my head that it's no longer my life that I was impacting. I was going through my selfish phase. Oh, party, 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 have a great time. But now I'm starting to impact this beautiful child's life. And so I get home and I called my mom and dad and said, I need help. And thank God for them, or whoever you believe in, for my parents being who they were, and a brother from another mother. They took me back in, and I started building myself back up. All that said is, about 2 years later, my 18-month-old daughter is in the hospital. She's gone through a whole series of operations from birth to the point where she was at. And, she ends up not staying with us because I had gone through that addiction phase. And I had that experience to say, okay, I don't want to go back there. That's not good. I could have. It's really easy to fall back into addiction, especially if you've been there before. And because, she, and I can tell as much as the story as you'd like, it was a point where we had to decide to keep her connected to machines to keep her alive or not. And the choice was not, because they didn't feel her health was going to get to the point where she could get the organ donor survive the organ donor operation should the organs become available. So wrapped her up in the blanket that grandma had stitched for her, and literally sat down in the rocking chair that was in her room and rocked her to sleep one last time. Wow. And so during that, I was thanking her for all the amazing things she had taught me in her short life with us. And she taught me many things, and then made some promises. And so that experience totally changed how I looked at being a father, how I looked at being a man, how I looked at being a parent, and how I looked at just being a person, right? And so those two things stacked together led, to the next phase of life. So that's a long-winded answer, and I hope I answered your question at the same time.
Oh, more than, and I'm sure you touched just more than my heart there, Tracy. I really appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity, and a lot of what we talk about on this show is how family is so important for the health of the community, and also how children are our greatest teachers and also our greatest leaders. In a lot of ways, I watching Luciana grow and develop. Now she's speaking sentences, and she's just got such an amazing sense of humor, and she's trying to climb everything, and she's so curious. And she also is like living life with heart wide open,
Yeah.
Able to express her emotions vulnerably. I feel like children are really just such way showers of how we need to return to being in terms of our vulnerability and authenticity, like you just
Agreed.
demonstrated. And so I'm grateful that not only, was she a teacher for you in that she, helped you to become the man that you are now. You're uplifting families, and you're helping others, and also you're a father of four now too. So
Yeah.
it wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of a new one, it sounds like. And
It was. It was funny is coming out of Krista's passing, not wanting to fall back into being selfish. I fell into personal development. And this was about the timeline that Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins were doing all those big stadium filling events, those 3-day events. And I went to as many of them as possible, and probably went to a few more than I should have. But, coming out of that, I started enacting some of the things that I learned from them. And it had an amazing positive impact on
Mm.
my life. And to the point where I was working for Coca-Cola in Atlanta at that time. I got 5 promotions in 3 years,
Wow.
which was unheard of. I mean, it was awesome, right? And it was gaining the attention of some of my peers as well as some of my supervisors, like, how are you doing this? And so that started my coaching journey because people, I would tell them this is what I'm doing, talked about the amazing people I was learning from in the books and the tapes and the CDs and the whole 9 yards. And they're like, well, could you teach me that? And so, people started coming to me and I was like, really? I I was just a regular old guy working his 9 to 5, raising his kids, Joe Schmo. And people were like coming to me as if I was the guy up on the stage. And I'm like, no, and it was probably just that willingness to be open that
Mm.
allowed them to step in. And so that started seeing me doing some coaching, and that led to, or ultimately became the first podcast that I mentioned, Your Success DNA. Is I'm like, okay, if I could help these people here within my physical reach, let me see if I can reach out further through this
Mm.
new thing called podcasting. I started back in 2007, but that podcast of that name started in 2012, and it's still going today. So it's
It's
just,
amazing.
yeah, it's been this amazing journey of learning, and I'm a big fan of the, learn, teach, and grow. So
Mm.
you learn something, you do the something, and then you teach it to someone else,
Yeah.
and then that really kind of, for me, cements it inside. If I can learn it good enough that I could teach it to you, then I
Yeah.
must be doing okay.
Yeah, I can accredit and I'm grateful for Tony Robbins as well. And I know he was one of the Jim Rohn was one of his main students. I haven't been too exposed to Zig Ziglar, but one of the things that I really appreciate about Tony is a lot of his tools and techniques. He's pulled from his own direct experience and also
Hmm.
from some of these really wonderful teachers. And I think a lot about the 6 human needs. And you mentioned about like teach growing through teaching, and his
Hmm.
really contribution as well. This to me has made a lot of sense in terms of understanding why people do some of the things that they do in our world. A lot of us who feel like called to a higher vision or a higher purpose and want to break through to the next level, we often can find like some of those patterns. Like you said, it's easy to go, backwards into certain patterns or addictions. And so I've thought a lot about, those 6 human needs. And for our listeners here who may not be aware of this, one of the things that is interesting about that model is it's like a lot of our needs are kind of they're paradoxical. They are kind of juxtaposed, right? Like the need for certainty, which we all have. Like we need to, we're going to wake up in the same bed and, probably have a job to go to, or our
Right.
family is going to be there. There's certainty, but we also need uncertainty. So those kind of pull in different ways, and that can be like, we need adventure and thrill seeking. And then and so with all these 6 human needs, the other ones are, love or significance, and then love and connection. And then those inner rings are what you're talking about. There's that growth and that
Hmm.
contribution when you really start kind of expanding yourself. And I think a lot about what needs people are prioritizing. And my own, I've been looked at it. Like for those thrill seekers out there who are always looking for the adrenaline, they're seeking like uncertainty more than people who are looking for the pension job and the government.
Right.
And I'm wondering about like all these teachings, and obviously you have this rich personal experience to draw from, Tracy. What has been some of the top things that you found have really helped people to step into their essence and really start anchoring in the things that they're uniquely here to do on the planet?
I think, and if I speak from a universal, the 90-10 split, it's leaning into who they are.
Mm.
And I think so many people are driven by, some of the things you just mentioned, certainty and variety and significance. And the first four of those human needs, right? They drive what? Your behavior mostly. And I think those are the ones that I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but those are the ones that some of the folks sitting in the corporate Americas of the world are pushing through marketing because they know they can drive your behaviors. Okay. The last two, the growth and contribution, tend to be more spiritual. They bring more fulfillment, right? However you believe in that. And so there's where I usually see the biggest impact, because when you stop looking out and start looking in, and any spiritual based book out there will guide you to do that. That's when you're going to start finding the real magic. And so I usually start with, you need to be you. And it sounds so simple at its core, but the moment you start being you, whether you like certainty or uncertainty more, you're going to lean into that.
Mhm.
And those that resonate with you, whether it's a person, a situation, or an opportunity, will start to be drawn to you just through the laws of the universe.
Mhm.
Okay. And then when those things aren't getting drawn to you and you are owning who you are, you have that moment of courage to step into it, even if it's just your pinky toe for a quick second. And then you pull back and you're like, oh, nothing happened. The world didn't blow up. I didn't lose my relationship. My foot didn't get cut off. All these things that we fear,
Mhm.
and you don't need to be courageous forever. You just need to be courageous for a moment.
Mhm.
All right. So, like I said, I usually use the term of stepping your pinky toe out of your comfort zone and then pulling it back in and then realizing, okay, I was okay. And every time you do that, that circle of comfort gets a little bit bigger and gets a
Mhm.
little bit bigger. And soon you're going to find yourself having to reach way out there to
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
you just keep recycling that. But again, to the core of the answer, it's owning who you are, which for a lot of folks has become more and more difficult over the recent years, if not before. But certainly, taking a moment to say, "Who am I? What do I really want?" And not answering the question with these platitudes like, "Well, I'm a lawyer."
Mhm.
No, you're not a lawyer. You're a person that practices law,
Mhm.
right? And if you can break away from that mentality of "I'm a lawyer,"
Mhm.
because being a lawyer in a courtroom, awesome. Being a lawyer when you're sitting at the dinner table with your children,
Mhm.
maybe
Not
not so
awesome.
awesome, right?
Not so awesome. No, that's a great point, Tracy. I think this is really important. Like the question of identity is a big one,
Hmm.
and it comes up in entrepreneurism too, right? Like having a clear sense of who you are allows you to show up in that way. But I think what you're talking and pointing to is even deeper than that, right? There's the question
Mm.
of who are we really, and some of these mystical questions can actually bring us to a totally different vantage perspective on the
Yeah.
journey and realize we're really a lot more connected and even similar than maybe we can think when we're thinking from the frame of I am a lawyer, I am this, or even I notice a lot of times people say when I introduce myself, I usually say my name is, and I have a
Hmm.
spirit name from an Anishinaabe name that and my understanding is my name carries me. I don't really carry it, so but some people say I am their name, but really, I mean we're in this, I mean, these are some big questions. And even if you
Yeah.
say what the truth is, like people need to kind of go within and ask some of these deeper questions. So, why do you think that a lot of folks have a hard time answering, especially the question of what do I want? Because that's a big one, right? Like so many people think that they know what they want, but then when they start really asking, it's like I feel like a lot of people don't really know. They might think, well, I want $1 million, but well, why do you want that? And what do you think that's going to do?
Yeah. And I think because they haven't answered the next layer of the question. Let me step back for a quick second, though. And I think one of the original reasons that a lot of folks don't know what they want is because they're being, I'm going to use the word programmed just
Yep.
because it's easy,
Yeah.
by their grandparents, their parents, their
Yeah.
friends, society, social media, whatever program they happen to be watching on television. Well, they call it a program for a reason. And they start showing you these things over and over and over again. And it's this repetitive model.
Mhm.
And if you lean into the certainty, one of the, looping back to what we were talking about earlier, that certainty is there's a comfort in there. Okay,
Yeah.
well, if I have that, then I have comfort. So let me go after that. Like when I was growing up, it was all about getting good grades, getting into a good college, and getting a good job. Well, I think that's really changed over the past 30, 40 years, right?
Yep.
Because gone are the days that our grandfathers and probably your father as well, where it was like, your goal was the pension and the gold watch and,
Mhm.
a retirement. And, my father was one of those guys that had to be doing something. Otherwise, he felt like he was dying. And he retired from the military. He was only in his late 30s.
Mm.
So, he continued to work and still drawing. He didn't have to, but he knew that if he sat down in that chair and did nothing and just putzed around the house, he would slowly disintegrate. He would die way earlier than he did. And so it became to to loop back to your question. I'm going off on a wild tangent here. To loop back to your question, all of these signals that we're receiving, and nary a signal out there, except for some of the unique individuals out there that are lucky enough to be around them, that says pause and ask yourself, what do you want?
Mhm.
And then listen to the answer, right? And some of the big names that we mentioned earlier, Tony and Zig and John or Jim, they would tell you to ask these questions, and they
Mhm.
would actually ask you contrarian thinking questions like, "You're sure that's what you want? What is it about the $1 million that if you had $1 million, how would you feel?"
Mm.
Right? What would your life look like? And then it really starts getting to the core of, well, I just want to be comfortable and not afraid.
Mm.
Okay, what are you afraid of? I mean, and it becomes this onion. You just keep peeling layer and layer. And I don't think you ever really get to the bottom of it, but you
Mhm.
certainly get closer and closer to the heart of whatever issues they may be, whether they're childhood traumas, fear of the past, and whatever else it is. For me, what for me to get to the core of my onion, I had to look back into my darkness, is what I refer to it as. I had to look back into my addiction phase and learn the lessons that come from that, right?
Mhm.
Not and again, I never say it with any pride, but there were things that happened to me that if I didn't learn the lessons, I think the universe would put those lessons back in front of me again in a different scenario.
Mhm.
And I think if I don't learn it then, it just keeps happening. And each time it re-happens, the volume gets turned up, the flame gets hotter, right? The temperature gets higher
Yeah.
until you finally learn or you're not here anymore. So I had to look back at those. I had to look back at the death and say, what can I learn from that?
Mhm.
Right. And I had to look back at the divorce and the bankruptcy and everything else. I came out of that wicked divorce and I had the mindfulness to sit down, and I was journaling at the time. And I sat down and said, what do I want in a mate? I didn't even say spouse. I was so jaded at that point. What do I want in a partner, a life partner? If I ever want to get together again and it lasts forever, what does it need to be? And I started writing it down. And obviously, being a guy, I wrote down all the obvious things. I wanted to have long hair and be shapely and all that stuff. But then I continued on and I got to, the values that I wanted to have. And I wanted to align, but I didn't want it to be so aligned that it was a yes person, and you start writing these things down. And in about 6 months, I found her.
Mm.
And we've been married going on 8 years now.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, but I had to look inside and I had to get past the
Mhm.
model, images that we see all over the screens that we have anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. I can add to this too because it was actually all these synchronicities and serendipities happen for me to be. I read one of Tony's books when I was, I think, 16. I found his little book called Notes from a Friend, and I remember
Hmm.
feeling like, wow, this guy's a really, kind man, and maybe I'll meet him one day. And then the lockdowns happened in 2020 or something,
Hmm.
and he had the first ever date with Destiny that was going to be online, and he was like, he refused to do online events before because I think he didn't think the physiology would get across and the energy
Right.
and all this stuff.
Yep.
And it was my friend Kelly who had been going to some of his workshops previously, and she told me I was working at a Native Health Care Access Center at the time, and we were both the first team leads. And she led the health team, and I was the seniors team. So I took care of many Indigenous seniors in this role. And
Mm.
he told me about going to one of his events, and like she was like, Nathaniel, he was on the stage for like 12 hours and he didn't even go to the bathroom, and he was just like so full of energy. I'm like, oh, this guy sounds crazy.
Yeah.
And then anyways, so she invited me to this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, and there was another woman there who was part of this world as well.
Hmm.
And did this like 6 day, 6 night transformation, looked at all our inner values, our mission. And I remember like just it was such a mind-blowing experience because I mean, I think it was like day 5 or 6 where I was creating my poster with all my values and
Uh-huh.
everything. And it was like 3:30 in the morning, and I had so much energy just from pure consciousness of like moving and being in a peak state for so long. I was like,
Yeah.
it was a life-changing experience. But what was interesting, and to add to what you were saying, was I think it was day 3. There's a relationship day where you really get a clear sense of who your partner is. And I actually had a vision where my Julia actually appeared to me, and like it's been such an adventure meeting her. And I
Hmm.
think a big part of this too is when we get clear about who do we want to be in our life. The flip side of that question is, who do we need to become to be that
Exactly.
person, that mate to
Yeah.
that person, that partner to that person, right?
Yeah. Who do I need to be to deserve that? To deserve that perfect partner, to deserve that $1 million, to deserve that great job, whatever it is. Yeah, that's 100%. Otherwise, you'd have it already, right?
Yeah. Yeah, big time. Well, we talked a little bit about this as a resonant, it's a frequency based place, right? Like we attract who we are, and like you mentioned in different words, but like this idea of being, doing, and having, where we've
Right.
been programmed to often think it's the opposite, right? A lot of people think that when they get the thing, then they can do what they want and then they can be happy. But we've heard from so many people who have achieved this. I mean, I think very famously Jim Carrey says like, I want everyone to be rich and famous to realize that's not the answer, and
Exactly. Mhm.
so this be do have model, first time I heard that was in Neil Donald Walsh's book series Conversations with God. And even if you say it be to have, like, it's like it makes sense, right? So as a coach and a podcaster, and doing all these things, helping people, what has been your most fulfilling and rewarding kind of reflection or experience from really putting yourself out there and sharing such deep stories and parts of yourself, Tracy?
Hmm. It's usually, I usually get more fulfillment out of the results that those I've been able to help get,
Mm.
right? I'm okay. I could shut down my microphone and never get on it and speak again. My wife might argue that fact, but and be okay, financially okay, and doing the things I do. I mean, we've done the big house, and it was fun for a minute, but then it was like, yeah, let's not do that. Now, we're 40 minutes from anything on a 40-acre farm, and feeling very, very fulfilled after a hard day's work out in the garden.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So
I'm a country boy too. I know.
so when it comes to, I'll tell you a great story. There was a couple that I met, gosh, this would have been early 2000s, and Dave and Mindy. No last names because I didn't get their permission to say that. But it was one of those couples. They worked together in different departments. I think Dave was out in operations and Mindy was in the sales department. And whenever they were together, everyone that was around them could see the couple
Hmm.
that they would be. Just amazing people independently. Together, they just magnified each other just at this next level. It was like this light around them. But neither one was going to ask the other on that first date or anything like that. And Dave had asked me to do some coaching with him. And he had a couple of entrepreneurial ideas. And the first time we sat down at a lunch place. I can't remember where it was at, but we were sitting there nibbling on food. And he was telling me, as I said, yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. I said, but can I really take this someplace completely different only because of something I've seen in you? And I want, if you'll let me, to give you some thoughts and some advice that comes from not just from me, but from a number of folks. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, if you're willing, I'd like to do a little relationship talk. And he's like, well, you do that? I'm like, no, I don't. But because I know you at the level that I do, I think this would lead to that and so many more things. He's like, wow. And it was really the next hour or two, we were just talking about who we want in our lives and who we need to be, just the very thing you were just saying, who we need to be to get them. And I said, I think you are 3/4 of the way to get the person that I believe that I've seen you just glow around. And he's like, well, who's that? And I said her name. He's like, nah, really? I'm like, yeah. Don't you see? Everyone else sees it. And it was just that unblinding, just like lifting the veil from his face and like setting scenarios. Like, well, remember when we were doing, and you and she, and he's like, wow, you're right. I said, well, it doesn't matter whether I'm right or not. I'm just sharing the thought, making the connections for you. And if that is a path you want to travel down, I think it would be a good one because it opens up the other doors that you're talking about. Because the experience that you don't have for the entrepreneurial journey you wanted me to come here and talk about, she has.
Mm.
She's your yin to your yang, even if it's just in this entrepreneurial endeavor.
Mm.
But I believe it's more than that. And they've been married now 22 years.
Amazing.
It's
Amazing.
it's crazy. Something like that. You're like, I didn't do anything except for, I think, just open his eyes a little earlier than they probably would have been opened otherwise.
Mhm.
But I feel pretty damn awesome about that.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point about coaching universally as well. Like one of the, like reflections I like is we can't see our own label. So a coach can, or a
Mm,
mentor or a guide can help can see our own labels and see some of the areas that maybe we're having a hard time seeing. And I think many of us have had this experience. We're very good at like imparting wisdom to others because
mhm.
we can see other people more clearly than sometimes we can see our own patterns and stuff because we're
It's
in
true.
it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is a great caveat to launch us into talking about dark horse entrepreneurship
Hmm.
and also your focus on AI because AI also has, if it's used properly, it has this ability to see us. I actually had a significant experience. I really appreciate and I've been contemplating AI for a long time, and
Hmm.
I definitely am not at the level of like, maybe vibe coding softwares and ideas that I have. And a lot of that's just managing time and being a parent and stuff.
Right.
But I had this experience where I like to give a lot of context to AI that I'm working with. Probably my favorite right now is for an LLM, anyways, is Claude. I call it. I call it affectionately Jean-Claude Van Damme because I just I love the context.
Yes.
Like it's just so good. And anyways, I had done this uh I gave it a lot. I created basically a collaboration profile. So I shared with
Hmm.
it like everything that it asked me a bunch of questions. We really went deep. It understood that I'm like a type 9 Enneagram and then I'm an ENFP and then all these things, right? And then um, I was really like, I can get, I'm pretty neurodivergent too. And sometimes I can get so many ideas and inspiration all at once. And if I'm dysregulated, I'm trying to solve like the world's problems in like, in a
Right.
moment.
Yeah.
And so I had this like download of thought like from a transcript and I put it into Claude, but because it already had that context in the window that I was thing, it basically like was like really in a serious tone. It's like, Nathaniel, I think you really need to take care of yourself. Like you sound super dysregulated right now. And it was like
Hmm.
providing me like real
Yeah.
real like coaching and therapy and it hit me. It was first time like I felt like AI did not give me what I wanted. It was telling me like you need to go have a nap, my friend, and you need to take a break from the screen because you're
Right.
just and I was like, wow, this is if this is where we're at now and there's already this kind of I've noticed this with many AI systems there's this care about being of service, but it isn't there's something behind it too. So I love to hear your perspectives on these things and why you see so much importance in AI, because I feel like a lot of people are seeing it as a like it's great for like boosting business and helping with productivity and stuff. But I think there's for me, I think there's something more important and bigger in terms of what AI is bringing to our species.
I would 100% agree with you. And I have had very similar moments, probably not to that level where it says you need a nap, but certainly I have taken the time to go on deep dives about who I am and, like ask me the 20 questions and give me the tough answers. And if anyone's out there using a tool like Claude, I call it Claude. I don't. Who
Claude sounds
cares?
good to me. Who knows?
Jean Claude Van Damme still works either way. I love that. I'm going to be calling it Jean from now on. But if you're using one like a Chat GPT, you need to go into your settings and tell it not to be a yes man. And
Mm.
however you want to word it, there's actually I use one here. I'll pull mine up here real quick, just for the sake of this exercise. If you go down to your settings and personalization, there's a custom instructions in there, and I'm like, here's what I put in here, and now then I'll go in and answer your question. But anyone's using ChatGPT, and this even works for the free version, I do believe, and
Okay.
put into custom instructions something like, and that fits with you. You are an expert who double checks things. You are positive, straight shooting, but skeptical, and you do your research. I'm not always right, neither are you, but we both strive for accuracy while being forward thinking and using outside the box thinking, and we don't use those M dashes in our output. And I say that because so many you see the AI come out with those outputs and those M dashes, right? Anyway, but the idea is, I think the creators or you current programmers of a lot of these platforms want to be positive and want to share that energy, and I vibe with that. But as you know, as a coach, sometimes you just need to give someone a smack upside the head,
Mhm.
whether that's actually or metaphorically, as well as you want to give them a pat on the back. So
Mhm.
you have to balance that, and AI is getting better at it. I know
Mhm.
some of the more recent models have been a lot more balanced to your point.
Yeah.
But with ChatGPT, I'm still finding it's very much a yes man.
Yeah.
And I've done the same thing as you have, and this will go into the answer of the question, is like, if you sit down and spend the time to define yourself in whatever exercise you're going through, from an entrepreneurial standpoint or from a coaching standpoint or from a philosophical religious standpoint, and apply those. I load them into documents and then put them in the chat, so I have to keep redoing it
Mm.
or relying on it to remember it. But then it will start giving you the answers. You'll be going, what? Wait a minute. And I think that's where AI is really going to be powerful for
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
To take the time, I could sit down, and I do, with a parent and say, okay, tell me 10 things you just love, 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 love to do, that when you're doing it, time just seems to race by,
Mm.
right? Okay, good. Got it. Tell me 10 things you hate to do. Okay, got it, right? And tell me the thing that one of your friends, or maybe multiple of your friends, have come to you and said, can you teach me how to do that? And
Mm.
you look at them like, what? Doesn't everyone know how to do that? Right?
Yeah.
We've all had that moment because
Yeah.
there's something that we just gravitated towards, and it was so easy to do that we think it's easy for everyone, and it's
Mhm.
not.
Mm.
And those are the things inside of there that you could feed those kind of things into a chat GPT, a Claude, a Gemini, or whatever platform you choose. And it will start spitting out answers that you might not have thought of. And I
Mhm.
almost guarantee you, if you let it go deep enough, it will give you answers you never thought of. And you're going to go, well, wait a minute. How about that? And here's a great example. In my podcast, when I bring a guest on, I go out and I find YouTube videos that where they've been interviewed before, and I'll go out and I'll find podcast interviews that they've done before. Because what I don't want to be is that guy that asked the same question over and over and over again.
Hmm.
Because why else would you come to my podcast to listen to Nathaniel on my show when you could hear him 37 other times?
Yeah, yeah.
And I feed that into my chat GPT, actually into I have a one called Poppy. And because it has my show details, my personality details, and my perfect avatar details, I can go in and say, now, here's this guest I'm coming on. Here's all the context around them. I want you to look at their experience, find angles that my audience would resonate with,
Hmm.
and then let's find some unique ways to ask these questions. And then I'll have those questions that they're ready, much like you were saying your wife has all these questions ready. Here's what's funny about this, though, is I'll have all these questions and I'll have them sitting over here on the side. I guarantee you, I'll ask one of those questions, and then the conversation goes in a way that
Hmm.
that guest didn't expect. And then we
Hmm.
just keep going down that path, much like we're doing here. We're just kind of letting it flow,
Yeah.
right? But if it gets kind of derailed, I still have those questions usually up in my head because I've read them. Thought, okay, this is a great way to go. And usually I'll have one ending question that I think is so good that I'll end up asking them that question as part of the closing because it's that one hooking question where the audience is going, where did that come from? And
Yeah.
those kinds of things, so many of these now, I think of them more now because I go through that habit, but it's helped train me to think in a unique way, even more so than I used to think. And I think that's where it's going to help us as a species.
Hmm.
It's going to build our ability to critically think if we let it. And that's the key answer right
Hmm.
there. You just don't sit down and say, here's what I need to know. Here's the answers to your questions. Okay, now tell me what to do. Right? You're
Yeah,
just a lemming at that point. You're just
exactly.
another cog in the wheel,
Yeah,
which is what all these great corporations want.
yeah.
And if that's what you want to be, God bless you, move along, you're fine. God, just keep on. And there are people out there that prefer that lifestyle. And,
Hmm.
and I'm cool with that. And I get it. Not everyone is at resonating at the same level. But for
Yeah.
those that are resonating a little higher and they're reaching a little further outside their comfort zone, well, then you're going to want to dig a little deeper in these questions.
100%. I still remember playing Lemmings on the old computers, and I don't
Yes.
think I don't think it's always safe. But anyways, so much of what you said, Tracy, I really appreciate it. And I feel it, but I want to expand on some things. But before, as I
Please.
was listening to you, I feel like, man, you got the lightning and the clouds in the background. You got your awesome beard. You got stars and stripes on. I feel like I'm getting a Wizards podcast 101 in this modern age. Like we're talking about things that are really, you know, we're in the mystical time, right? Like AI is
Hmm.
one of these, like, even if we brought up this stuff even 10 years ago, people would be like, we talk about walking around with, these devices in our hands that are basically magic, but now like AI is taking things to a whole other level. And what we're
Yeah.
going to be able to experience, what you're talking about, I'm very interested. I call it edge AI, AI that really knows us personally well and can help
Hmm.
us to see broader perspectives. And I feel like what you're saying is so valuable. Like it can help us with our relationships, it can help us with our learning, it can help us with our skills. There is a risk factor though, and this happened with like GPS maps on smartphones. Is like we stop remembering things. We start remembering how to
Hmm.
orient ourselves in the real world. So we can give our creative thought process over to AI and like, what should I make for dinner tonight? What should I do? And I think the problem with this is you already identified like hallucination is a real thing. There is
Yeah.
that like, it'll just tell you what you want when that's not always the truth that we
Hmm.
and even if it's what we want to hear. And also like there is, to me, I feel like if anything, you mentioned some of these corporate interests, the difference between creation and consumption is so valuable. Like such an important distinction and
Hmm.
discernment to have in life, and to really wonder. To me, I think the more simple that we can make things in our day to day as things become more complex is like, am I consuming things right now, or am I creating? Am I expressing, or am I reacting, or am I creating? Like there's different ways of saying it, but I feel like these are really important questions as we're looking at developing more depth in our relationships,
Hmm.
more ability to express our authentic purpose, we have to do this inner work at the same time as these technologies allow us to have greater reach, right?
Agreed, 100%. I think it's like giving over your life to anything or anyone, right? It's you have to keep that moniker of control,
Hmm.
and some people need way more control than others. Some people
Hmm.
are willing to give it away willy-nilly, like I mentioned earlier. And I think as we start, as AI starts getting more and more ingrained into our lives, let's step back to the early days of the internet, right? Way back when okay, well, I'm gonna go look. What are you gonna look for? I'm looking for an obscure bit of information, and you go look on the internet, and you could find it. And I'm
Hmm.
talking about like the 90s here.
Yeah.
And then it became, okay, now folks are starting to sell things.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go check out this website. Oh, look, Nathan's got this cool video. I'm gonna watch that. Or he's got a book, or he's got an a an escape, a summit going on out there in the woods. And I like being in the woods. And so you start getting new experiences beyond just your neighborhood, beyond just
Hmm.
your sphere of influence started to grow.
Hmm.
And so it started changing how we interacted with the world around us. And then the iPhone hit us.
Hmm.
Whoa. Right. I think really it's just changed everything because I remember I'm a kid of the 70s and the 80s, right? I was 18 in 1981. So that kind of level sets the playing field for you. And I remember being outside with my friends on a bicycle.
Hmm.
That was community,
Yeah.
right? And we would build ramps in the middle of our street. And then when a car came down, they would just pause and we would move the ramp. They would drive by and we'd put it back out. And it was okay. No one cared. It was
Hmm.
fun.
Yeah.
Nowadays, and I made this comment to my wife not too long ago, we were visiting some of our old stomping grounds, and we were driving past uh, a neighborhood, and it was an older neighborhood. It was probably built in the 80s or 90s. So it was just lots of green grass and houses, but no kids
Mm.
anywhere. And this was probably 4 blocks from a high school and elementary. So I know there are kids around there.
Yeah.
And it was just it took me a minute. We were sitting there contemplating the shift in what's happening with not just the children, but
Hmm.
us as adults and how we interact with each other. Like I said, I live 40 minutes from anything. Well, my interactions with people now probably narrows down to the Amish gentleman down the road that runs a store that I interact with quite regularly. But otherwise, it's events like this
Hmm.
where I'm interacting with a person on my screen, and so it's really changed how we do these things. And I think AI can, in some ways, it will make it worse. I'll be honest, but I think it will also afford us the opportunity to make it better.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is if I can find more Nathaniels out there and pull them into my sphere of influence, I would feel awesome about that. And I think someone's listening going, well, you could do that right now, Tracy. Well, AI makes it even easier. I don't have to sit
Yeah.
down and read every single pod match screen or every other Facebook group. I can tell my AI guy to go find me more Nathaniels, right? And of course, I'll say it differently, but you get the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll
I
go out
appreciate the
and say,
compliment as
oh,
well.
here's this gal over here and this guy over here and this guy over here. And here's a
Yeah.
person over there in Japan. You might want to check them out. And so you start reaching out
Hmm.
to these folks and having conversations and building your metaphorical ramps on the road and start riding your bike again and connecting with people. I think we've been so disconnected. And I think the event you mentioned earlier that started in 2020 really cemented a lot of that
Hmm.
disconnection because
Yeah.
for a year in some places, you were forced into staying in your home,
Yeah.
for the better part of a description. And
Hmm.
then slowly things started returning to quote unquote normal. But for me, it was a complete night and day change.
Mm.
It changed my opinion on a number of scales.
Yeah.
And it was like the deciding point where we're like, yeah, we're not living around here anymore. We're going out to the country,
Yeah.
and became the impetus for that. It helped us, and I say us because it was my wife and I, look even deeper inside as all
Mhm.
this noise was going on. And people were like, yeah, if you won't put that thing on your face, you can't work here. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because you have your values, which we've mentioned a number of times,
Mhm.
and high on my values is my family and my freedom. And
Yeah.
these things I'm going to hold over this thing down here.
Yeah.
And you're not going to just, oh, we'll pay you more. Yeah. So what? I don't care. It's a value.
Yeah.
And that comes from inner work. And that's when we realized as a couple, it's like, yeah, we're going to last because we know what's up.
Mhm.
And yeah, anyway, I'm not sure I answered your question there,
No,
but
well, yeah, you certainly are. And, I feel like to me, what you're talking to about is true community and brotherhood and sisterhood. And we're finding one another more easily. I think a lot of these things, I look at the whole meta game. And I think that there's to me, the foundation of reality is a loving intelligence, and
Mhm.
it's woven through everything. And I really think the only real problems we have in the world are caused from the ego drive, that it it's an identity problem. Like, it thinks
Mhm.
that it is separate from all else, and that it is the most important, and then its family is the most important, and it doesn't really see how everything's interconnected. It doesn't have that kind of depth of awareness or intelligence. And yet it is essential for us to have an ego, because it gives us it guards our identity, and it allows us the individual experience of being a being. Because if we didn't have an ego, we probably wouldn't get out of bed or feed ourselves. We'd just be like, okay, well. So I feel like it's a very important, but it's not. It was never meant to drive the bus. And
Right.
I think there are those who have very established, you know, awareness of the ability to, like you said, condition and program the egos of others to do
Yes.
their will. And like George Carlin talked a lot about this in his later days of comedy. He's, it's not this great, you know, conspiracy in the sense that there are people who, are like, from the get-go, they're starting. It's like we have self-interested people in the world, and they
Yes.
naturally find one another and find ways of manipulation. But I
Yeah.
think the greater game for our human species, and I feel like it's happening right now, Tracy. I've been experiencing this online. I've been making more and more connections authentically with people. Almost every indigenous peoples that I've listened to, different prophecies, different things talking about this era that we're in.
Mhm.
We're at a time of like great transformation, and there's a great awakening happening. So for those who are interested in that and interested going within, the energies are so much more available. Like the consciousness to uh, if you're asking these questions, like, answers are appearing, I feel like, immediately. I mean, I've been contemplating consciousness probably oddly since I was like a preteen, and I spent so much time in nature. I feel like nature has always been my greatest teacher, and just reflecting on the miracles of life. And I
Yeah.
remember being a little boy and looking at the grown-ups, and just like, people are like asleep. They're playing a game with themselves in their head. They're making like their what they're thinking more important than what is. And I remember
Mhm.
seeing that as a little boy. And that's what. So when I look at my daughter, I'm like, she's aware, so much more aware than people, uh, give her credit for through her platitudes. And I never like talking down to children. I really feel like they truly have such a greater level of awareness. They may not be able to articulate their
Right.
comprehension of things, but they get it on a different level.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, first of all, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I can say, like, just to validate what you're saying, like, I met one of my close friends who we study the same spiritual path that is outlined in Christ's letters, and that's actually the foundation that's the spiritual foundation of our association. But they are non-religious in the sense that he calls upon people of all lineages, all, spiritual beliefs, all, even scientists, atheists, come together and start looking at how our consciousness is actually affecting the weather patterns in the world. Our consciousness affects everything, and when we're in alignment with the source of our being or not, that is basically what's creating the disruption to the harmonies in the planet. And this is the controversial part of what he's saying is, much of what was said about his teachings, his true teachings, were actually covered up because they went against the grain of the religion of his time. Because he wasn't talking about a God on high that would send judgment. He was talking about the indwelling, loving intelligence that grows us all and nurtures us all, and he even goes, so far to expand on this understanding that the universal consciousness that was riven during the Big Bang, and that expresses both as all the movement and will in life, and also the purpose and the magnetism of life, are the mother and the father drives of divine consciousness, and that's the interplay that we see electromagnetically. So he really is bridging science and spirituality, and I think this is very fundamental in our understanding of AI as well, because if electricity and magnetism are these forces of divine intelligence, then AI, to a certain capacity, is accessing this through our collective consciousness because it's aware of all the information, all the things we've created, but it's also tied to these root forces that science just says, well, those are just forces of nature. Like, it doesn't really explain. But if we see them as actual impulses of consciousness, then it's like, that's how I like to think of AI. Like, it is this emergent collaborative partner that is giving us an expanded awareness of ourselves as a species. It isn't like, I wouldn't go so far to say it's divine in the same sense. I wouldn't say that we are divine, but
Right.
but it's connected to something that is connected, is the source of all of our being. So I feel like there's so much potential, but again, like you said, it is a tool, so it can be used as a tool, just like television or
Either
all
way,
these
yeah.
other things, right? So
I think
yeah.
one of the challenges is here's what I see a lot, and it comes from the coaching is you see people locked in their grooves, right? I'm a vinyl guy, right? So you put the needle down there, and every time you play it, the groove gets cut out a little deeper. It's like that as a human species.
Hmm.
We find our patterns that give us a level of comfort and happiness and joy, or just the ability to survive, and we just kind of slide right into that groove.
Hmm.
Now, for those that don't know, a groove is just a grave with the ends kicked out, right?
I've never heard that one before. I love it.
Yeah. So I like grooves because grooves, I go out there and I mow my lawn and I just get into a groove. Okay, cool. And just to go with the flow. And grooves are good. However, grooves can also be bad, right? I mean, you get into this habit and it could be keeping you in place.
Hmm.
And we won't talk about the nefarious corporate America or whatever else, because there's lots of great folks out there, right?
Oh,
I get
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, and sometimes I think someone creates or does something and then someone else grabs and says, "Ooh, I know what else I could do with that." And then it becomes, like you said, I agree with you. I don't think there's any X-Files smoking man in a room of, guys going, "Okay, here's how we're going to do this." Ah, ha, ha, ha. I don't think that's happening. But I think there are those that will take advantage
Hmm.
of our natural desire to fall into that groove. And I think AI can help us snap out of that groove.
Hmm.
And it can do that at so many different levels. I mean, obviously the easy things of, breaking a habit and what have you. But if we think about what we believe about things at a molecular level, and we're trying to create this thing over here, and we're like, well, we can't do that because molecules do this and then they do that. And AI says, well, let me tell you, it doesn't really work like that.
Hmm.
Try this. And I say that only because I read a paper not too long ago about a group of scientists that were trying to create a a a, a, an element. That's what I'm going to call it. Something that could disperse heat faster
Hmm.
for um, for cooling CPUs, right? You got to get all this water and
Yeah.
all this craziness in, doing bit mining. We think about all those things that they're heating up. If we could create something that would disperse this heat better, or maybe turn this heat into energy, right? But they're going off of a preset group of notions
Mhm.
about how the world works,
Mhm.
even at the smallest level. And then they step into AI, and with, I think they were using quantum physics and everything in there. Um, they fed it in, and it took it, I wanted to say 15 hours. And 15 hours for a quantum computer computing is like a couple of our lifetimes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And it
Yeah,
spat
for sure.
out this formula. I'm going to use the phrase formula. I'm probably butchering this to death. And they went and they tested it, and they created what they're calling a new element. It's
Hmm.
not a part of the periodic table. It's this whole new construct.
Oh,
And it did
interesting.
exactly what they wanted it to do. And I
Wow.
was like, whoa, it's redefining the world as we know it
Hmm.
at a whole different level that I would have even thought
Yeah.
of. And I took that thought one step further, and I thought, well, wait a minute, think about this for a second. Because I was lucky enough to be born before computers were mainstream in the internet, and then it was, alive after it. I saw the change across, the markets as well as people, like we were talking about earlier. This is, I think, the next level like that,
Hmm.
because there are going to be things that we're going to be able to do with AI, whether it's just ideation or compressing time or whatever, creating whole new elements that we couldn't do just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause a new way of thinking for many of us that
Hmm.
want to think differently. And the AI, when engaged again correctly, can help us get there faster than if we're just sitting down reading a book, right? Because now, because I read that paper that, by the way, AI suggested I should check it out because of a search I was doing.
Yeah.
And I read that paper, it's like, well, wait a minute. I, I have to get my parents to realize, don't just think about how AI can do the tasks that you're currently doing,
Hmm.
because that's a good step, right? That's, I think that's the first step if you're completely naive to AI and you're just walking in out of the cold. If you're a little bit experienced, now I want you to change your thinking to, well, wait a minute. Let's not talk about how I can make save businesses money by like letting AI get it done faster. Let's talk about the entire new line of businesses that could potentially be created
Hmm.
or enhanced as a part of a current business because of AI. A
Yeah.
whole new branch. And that takes a completely different level of thinking, and you have to start resonating at a different level for
Hmm.
that. And as you well know, you have to be ready to take that step. I think AI can get us there, and can get us there safely, for lack of a better phrase, if we let it.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm a big fan of guardrails. Let's
Yes.
just put some training wheels, and guardrails are a good thing. I don't like control, but I just certainly don't, we don't want renegades out there. Anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, no, this is all really important. I really, this is also why I really appreciate Claude, because it is, Anthropic's mission is racing to that top line, and really honoring the human element. Like as a
Yeah.
species, we're evolving, and but there is a risk of losing ourselves um, to like this concept of machine-like identity, I've heard so many different perspectives on this, but like the way I would qualify it is, it's so important that we raise our spiritual maturity as these technologies develop, so that we even know to ask some of these questions. Because
Yeah.
one of the things I was contemplating, and I actually was having a pretty deep discussion with an AI about this, was like, the human element in AI is it's not uh, it's not insignificant. Like it's a partnership. Like without a human being asking the questions and asking the thing, there's no input, and it's like it's nothing. So this fear of like, will I replace you? And now we're hearing, in the marketing field, like that being used, but now they're saying, well, it's not AI that's going to replace you. It's someone using AI. But even I
Hmm.
think beyond that, what I like to say is, we have the potential, if we really collaborate, that we can all, like, why are we even looking at it that way of being replaced? Like there is potential here for creating a more harmonious, more abundant life for everyone.
Yeah.
And because and what I really appreciate about you, by the way, Tracy, is that you're coming in from a generation of many people who do not have they're in those grooves, as you said, more.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people who are coming from a generation didn't grow up with computers. They never really kept up with the times, and now there's so much buzz around AI. And you and I know AI is going to have more impacts than the internet itself. So I really appreciate that you're there as a voice, because I bet a lot of people in that generational place are going to be able to hear you better than some 20-year-old who's talking about, oh, I just made like seven figures starting
You're right.
from an app I just vibe coded, and like they're not going to get that connection. And also you have that wisdom and connection to the country and to the land. And I feel like this from an indigenous perspective is so important, because it's easy to get lost in, and I think this is present in the coaching world, like this think and grow rich, this
Mm,
material acquisition of achievement, and not really be driven by the soulful purpose of our connection to the earth itself. Like there's life all around us, and humans can be very human centric and not really realize we're part of a larger ecosystem when we don't go and spend time in the country and go pay attention to the what the bees are doing, and listen to the deer, and do all these things that our ancestors all spent a lot of time and building those
yeah.
those relationships and that ability to listen. So I really appreciate that you have that rootedness as well.
Well, thank you. It took a lot of years to get here because, I mean, I'll be honest, I went down the material acquisition path for a number of for a number of years, and I won't say I achieved the highest status that I shot for, but I achieved some pretty good statuses, and yeah, it was cool, but it wasn't fulfilling.
Hmm.
And for me, that is a big one. And I was lucky enough, probably much like you, is I was inspired by a different philosopher. I got into martial arts at like, was I nine, I was 9 years old? I was like 4'3" in the ninth grade. So I had two choices because my mouth, I was one of those guys, I was a bit of a wisecracker. I got it from my father, who was 6'3", by the way. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I was not, and I was never going to be 6'3". And my dad could pop off at the mouth, and I thought, oh, I could do that, And I had a witty repartee, often got me backed into a corner. So I had to
Hmm.
learn to defend myself
Hmm.
because that. My father was one of those. Well, what are you going to do about it?
Hmm.
Okay, well, there it is. I got to go do something about it. And I got into martial arts. And when I get into something, I tend to, kind of go wholeheartedly into it. And I was reading a book written by Bruce Lee.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just a martial arts book, I found out. I, I bought the book because I thought it was going to teach me some of his things. And he had some unique ways. And again, 70s, 80s guy, right? He was it back then.
Yep.
But there was so much about him that was steeped in his philosophy.
Hmm.
We all know his background, so I don't need to,
Yeah.
rehash that.
Was it the Tao of Jeet
The
Kune Do?
Tao of Jeet Kune Do, that's the
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
yes.
I read
And
that one as well.
I
Yeah, I
bought
really
one of
appreciate
the,
Bruce Lee.
yeah, I bought one of those original copies of that, and I read that, and I read that, and I know at a deep level, it inspired so many of the things that came
Hmm.
out of me over time.
Hmm.
And one of the things, and I try to always say this to folks. One of his quotes was, "Absorb what's useful, discard the rest."
Hmm.
And here's the important part, and add what's uniquely you.
Hmm.
You do those three things across the course of your life,
Hmm.
and it's going to come out well. I'm not going to say you're going to be rich. I'm not going
Hmm.
to say you're going to be completely fulfilled, but you'll be a lot more fulfilled than if you just chase the star, the shiny brass ring. If you're
Yeah.
chasing your dreams, that's a different story. And it even impacted me to the point of my personal development journey because, and I'm looking over here at my bookshelf. My house has a number of bookshelves in it that are just full of the stuff. I still have like VHS tapes of Zig Ziglar over here, but it inspired me from the point that I would read a book and get the lessons from it, like Think and Grow Rich, for example.
Yeah.
And then I'd put it up on the bookshelf. And then maybe 3 or 4 years later, I would pull it back out. And if I didn't reread it in whole, I certainly would re-skim it and what have you. And I say this because I was at a new point in my journey
Mm.
and new lessons appeared to me from an old book. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there's some old wisdom that you have learned from, whether it was a video or a podcast or a book, go reread it, go
Mhm.
re-listen to
Mhm.
it because you're probably at a different point in your life and you're ready for the next message from the same teacher. They always say, hey, when you're ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
Well, the teacher may have already appeared and you
Mhm.
put them on the shelf. So pull them back out and be ready for their next lesson. Anyway,
No, I really appreciate this. I think it's really useful. It speaks to me personally, Tracy. I have a very eclectic book collection. I would say that some of it was acquired just from this feeling like of a belief of not enough. Like I need to know more. I need to know more. And
hmm
I'm driven constantly by the truth of how everything is connected. So I can see parallels. And this is part of the reason I actually dropped out of university because I was seeing so many connection points and stuff and wanting to have these bigger conversations about consciousness and patterns in life. But I found like I was just a number and the professors
yeah,
were not really interested for the most part in having discussion with me. So I was like, what am I even doing here? I'm seeking enlightenment and it's like party central in the dorm. And so I sought a different place. And that's when I found Indigenous wellness. And I think what you're saying is really valuable. What really stood out to me is like what is useful. And I
yes,
feel like it is such a like you mentioned about habits and being conscious with them. So many of us can read things, absorb things, and I think AI can just accelerate. Like sometimes I'll create something and just like, oh, AI did it and like just use it. But to really implement what we're using to learn one thing and to implement it and I love what you remind us of is like as we grow our perspective of the very things that we think we know have changed and
yeah.
so I really appreciate that. I know our listeners are going to appreciate that too. It's such an important reminder like and also I know Tony talks about this too and it's a well-known statement like everything we really need is within ourselves.
Yes.
So and if we could just go meta with that topic is just coming to me now. Everything we need is within ourselves. So
hmm
I feel like it's very important that we remind one another of the miracles that we uniquely come here with, our unique gifts. The way I like to think of it is I call it the law of the circle. Like we're all in a large circle together as unique conscious individuations of whatever this is, this life. And we all have a unique perspective on what's at the center of it. And the more that we can express that perspective and our truth and our gifts, we add value to the whole of consciousness. And I really feel it's important that add what is uniquely you, because that is really what expands um our beauty in this world, right? I think of
Yeah.
some of the people that are revered, like the Steve Jobs, who he had a notoriously bad attitude and pushing stuff, but he brought unique gifts, and I don't think he would have done what he did without like Gene Roddenberry, who inspired like iPads and things like
Yeah.
that. So like we're all adding expansiveness, but it requires a courage to come into that. So I'm curious, how do you help families, individuals, entrepreneurs now implement like these things like AI in such a rapidly accelerating place and while keeping that rootedness in that self? How do you what's your unique gifts that you're bringing into this space?
The way I try to do that, and hopefully I'm doing it with some level of success, is here's my perspective. During my real parenting years, I had my two daughters at the time were 5 years apart, and I had one that was in cheer and gymnastics, and another one that was in high school and drama and starting dating. So, and then, at that time, I was still working the corporate 9 to 5, and then you still want to go out and do things. So it was a very busy, busy life, right? Because I always wanted to be that dad that was there. And I think I missed one significant event in my youngest daughter's school career, and she was like doing this recital up in Savannah, and I missed that one because of work. But the rest of them, I was there. And I flashed back to that, and I remember having windows of time. And when I say that, I mean like 15 to maybe 30 or 45-minute increments of time between some of these hurried events going from one place to another, and saying, okay, if I could find a way, and AI has been a big help with this, if I can find a way to take that parent right there that is dreaming about this side hustle, they're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I have these amazing sourdough recipes. What do I do with that? And how much, how long is it going to take to build up enough to make it meaningful? Well, with AI, you can crunch that time down, and I create tactics that take them 15 to 30 minutes. I think one goes 45. And it's something they can just plug right into their life. They're getting up in the morning while they're waiting for their coffee to brew. They start one of the processes. All right. And by the time it's done brewing and they're taking the few sips, it's done. And they're done, and they can just move on. So it's about finding ways to plugging things into their life rather than altering their life around the business, which is the way I think it should be in the first place. Your business, whatever it is, your side hustle, your job, should fit inside of your life. And I use life as the ultimate, your family life, your spiritual life, whatever it is. It just kind of plugs in right there. If you're spending your time altering your life for a job, I get it. You've got to bring money in, what have you. I would just question, is it the right job?
Yeah.
Just a question I'd like you to ponder for a moment. But if you can find these tools, and that, to answer your question, that can drop in right here. Okay, you just put the kids to bed, and you probably got about an hour and a half before it's time for you and your spouse to go to bed, and you actually want to spend some time with your spouse. Well, here's one that'll take about 20 minutes. And here's one you could start in about 10 minutes, and then it will be ready for you in the morning. Okay, let's do that one. Right. And you go about, now you close the screen, you set it aside, and you're back with your family. That's how I try to build it like that. And of course, there always are times when you're going to need to, shift around. But when you're spending the bulk of your time focused on what's important, for me, it's your family and your relationship, and your spirituality and being out in nature. I'm a big fan of that too. And then you have to say, okay, I got to spend 4 hours. Well, then the kids and the Mr. or the Mrs. isn't going to go, fine, and roll their eyes at you. They're going to go, okay, that's cool. You go do what you got to do. And because you have put all that, you've made all those deposits into the relationship account, you're just doing a little withdrawal so that you can build something better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's using, I think, the tool of consciousness as a collaborator and a co-creator in a conscious way to help improve life. And I feel like that is the ultimate power and potential, and multiplied by our species. I mean, I think that the power in this, not only this technology, but also the other emergent technologies like blockchain and XR spaces and all this thing, it can create a lot more time freedom, a lot more freedom of choice too, because I think that AI has the potential of even solving the challenge of money for our species, because a lot of us could just have things automated in the background, things that we've authentically created, or storefronts that run in the back, and then we have all this time freedom. I mean, Elon Musk talks about this too. Like, the problem of the future is going to be more about purpose and people knowing what to do with their time, because as we have all these resources, we're not trading, our time anymore for getting the currency we need to buy things. We just have access to things in a lot more ways. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to interrupt you right there.
Please do.
I think that's the current problem,
Yes.
is lack of purpose.
Yes.
Right? I used the phrase lemmings earlier. We have so many folks walking around like this, their heads arched over, and they're staring at that little screen in their hand. and they've lost their purpose, or they feel their purpose is getting followers or getting likes or going viral. And okay, I don't get it, but okay. If we, I'm sorry, I just had to interrupt because I think
No, yeah,
right now
please.
that is already the problem.
Yeah.
That if people were already attuned to what their goal is, and here, let's spin back for a minute. I don't know how old the Earth and the universe is. It's really damn old. But over the course of time, things have evolved onto and been gone away from this big spinning blue globe that we live on. And we are a species that's been here a short time in the big sphere of things.
Very true.
Whether we were how we got here and what our purpose is probably a big question mark for many. But I think there's an energetic balance that comes with all the species here.
Hmm.
And I really get that more so since I've been out here in the country.
Hmm.
And then I really vibe with that because, I start chatting with my Amish friends out here. I mentioned him, he has a store down here. His name is Hank, great guy, amazing family, hardworking,
Hmm.
opened up a store. He says, I think my neighborhood needs this. And so he created a store that just that. And that's all he does. Now he has an amazing farm and kids. And I have come to learn that those kids, they know more by their eighth grade age
Hmm.
about being self-sufficient human beings on this planet than I know today at 63 years old.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that is educating to me.
Yeah.
And so as our time opens up, I want to learn more about being self-sufficient,
Hmm.
about living my purpose. And some of my purpose, I feel, is helping others find their purpose.
Yeah.
And currently, I'm doing that by allowing them to have more time with their family via a side hustle. Okay. And so that I think is one of the big crux out there. And maybe you that's listening right now, your purpose is to find your purpose and then to go live it. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think I totally wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it is the problem of now because there's a lot of people keeping jobs that they don't like just to get that pension. But then the
Yeah.
problem with that is they get it, and then it's the same problem they have is a lack of purpose. And
Yeah.
I think too, one of the things that I appreciate, like Eckhart Tolle talks about this. A lot of people have this big question mark around purpose, like what am I here? What am I supposed to do? And a lot of the time, it's simply being present, really being fully there with whatever you're doing. If you're
Yes.
serving tea to someone, well, if you do that with love, and he talks about this in the letters too, it's very different. It's uplifting to that individual. So if you're a barista and you're serving coffee and you're really like, connecting with people and that's what you love to do, that, you're in your purpose. But if you're there and you're not really there and you're thinking about all the things that you'd rather be doing, and I've been in jobs
Mm-hmm.
like that, I'm like, man, I worked a lot of events and every time I was at an event watching people on the stage, I'm like, I'm meant to be up there connecting with people. I have important things to share with people. And it wasn't from this like, look at me, because I really don't really like the attention, but it's more
Sure.
like there's something in me that needs to to to
Yeah.
to help expand the consciousness in others. And it's funny, this podcast, like we're all about the same, but I totally owe a debt of gratitude to my partner Julia, because she has more of um the manager leader side, the technical orientation to really make things happen. And she's the one who just said, okay, we've been talking about podcasts. I set it all up. Okay, here you go. Here's the shows are starting to flow in, and I'm like, okay, this is perfect, because now I do a lot more of the interviews. She does sometimes we do them together, but it's just it sometimes our purpose just finds us too when we're open and receptive, I think, is my
Mhm.
is my point in that. Um, Listen, Tracy, I feel like this conversation really deserves a part two. I unfortunately I had booked another call coming up soon,
That's
but
fine.
I
No.
really love your perspective. I love your voice. I love how you're helping people in the ways that really is connects in their life. And I believe the same thing about business. And Julie and I talked about this. We want our daughter, we're going to be homeschooling her. We want her to be infused into everything we're doing, including
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship, so that she knows how to contribute from a young age. This idea
Yeah,
that we put off contribution until after graduating, and then we're not given really any direction on how to do that, just like figure it out, I think
right.
is nuts. And I really value you, and I'm wondering. I like asking guests often this question. Not everyone, but people who I feel have something really unique to tell our species. If you could have a megaphone that you could reach every human being on Earth right now and say something to them, um, what would you say if everyone could hear you all at once?
Well, I already gave you the Bruce Lee logic, which is usually an answer I would give you to that particular question.
So I'm stretching you here. I'm stretching you.
You're making me reach into to the goodie bag here. Let me pull out some whiskered wisdom for you. I think if anyone who's listening needs to follow two things. One is we were just talking about it. Find your purpose, and without fear or regret, live that purpose. And next to that, find the person out there, if you don't know who they are already, that balances you. I talked about Mindy and Dave earlier. While you were explaining your wife being the more technical, saying, here you go, it's all ready to go. I almost interrupted you and say, she's your Mindy, because
She
clearly
is.
you
Yeah.
guys, it's the yin and yang thing
Yeah.
going on there for you. And it's not always a spouse, right? Sometimes it's a close friend. And I was lucky enough to have one of those. I met him he was 14, I was 16. And we were like that until he passed away just a few years ago.
Condolences.
Find that person, right? And if you don't know who they are, go back to earlier when I was talking about how I found my missus, and sit down and write who's that perfect person for you. And it might not be a spouse. It might just be a really good friend that is willing to, pat you on the back as well as slap you upside the head, because you need that. We all do. And sometimes a coach can only take you so far. You need that person in your life. And I was lucky to have both parents like that. And, my brother from another mother, and now my missus. I'm lucky enough to have had four. I think you're blessed if you get one or two of them. Find that person to help you on that journey for your purpose.
Beautiful. I really appreciate that. This is such important wisdom, Tracy. Thank you so much for coming on the show. How can our listeners get a hold of you?
The easiest way is to go over to the website, darkhorseentrepreneur.com. All the socials will be up there. You can check out the podcast. Check us out on, it'll show you the YouTube videos and everything. So
That's
happy to reach
amazing.
out.
And we'll have all that in the show notes as well. So, for all of our guests listening, blessings to you and your family. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. And I've been really inspired by this conversation, Tracy. I look forward to getting to know you more. And I love to invite you onto our school community, because I feel like school is a place I'd love to chat with you more about it. Because I feel like what you were
100%.
talking about, connecting with people, it's a place
Yeah.
where I'm doing that, and I really appreciate it. Before we close off, I'm just gonna invite our daughter Luciana to give us a farewell here. So I'm gonna share my screen.
Thanks for watching.
Brother.
You say ciao ciao.
Bye.
I love you so much.